Hello, folks of the internet, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Show, brought to you by PT Creative. As always, I am your host, Evan Davies, and today I'm flying solo on this one. So, new one for the ONETA Show. First time I'm running solo, but that is a-okay. Just had some scheduling conflicts, but that's all right. Today, if you're not seeing the video format of this, we are talking the release schedule for Pokemon games. It's a big thing and a big topic moving forward within the Pokemon franchise. Now, I thought this was the best way to do this, as we got the announcement pretty much a month almost to the day last month that Pokemon Legends franchise will be returning with Pokemon Legends ZA. And one of the biggest things about that, outside of the obvious excitement of new Pokemon game and the excitement of the tease of Mega Evolutions coming back, is the fact that for the first time in what seems to be forever, but a long time, Pokemon is actually going to be taking a year off of giving a new mainline or major game. Although Pokemon Legends is kind of in a weird spot because it's new and it's just becoming a franchise now with the ZA announcement and release come next year, it's still far closer to a mainline. It's treated far closer to a mainline Pokemon game than, for instance, some of the spin-offs. But the biggest thing that I've seen in discussions online has been, oh my god, it's a whole year extra of development. Like, what are they going to do? And really, to me, this has been something I've been talking about in my private life when development of games comes up. And obviously, you guys know, as listeners of the ONETA Show from the past episodes, we love getting in the weeds about very specific topics. Obviously, Pokemon is something that is huge on my channel, so I really pay attention to development cycles and internet critique, valid or invalid, of the Pokemon franchise. So I thought that was the most interesting things to come out of the announcement. Was a lot of people, outside of the excitement of Mega Evolution, the return of a new Pokemon Legends game, and Lumio City, the biggest thing, it was amazing to me, the biggest thing people saw was, oh my god, and in a positive way, they're taking an extra year of development for Pokemon Legends. So I wanted to really digest what it is that I would create as a Pokemon game release calendar almost. What would be my development cycles on how I do things if I were the one helping Creatures Inc., Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, what would I be doing if I were the one making those decisions, and what I think may be best for the Pokemon franchise. So that's what we're really going to be discussing here today. One thing before we get into full detail about the thing is reality. When you talk about Pokemon, you need to remember that Pokemon is not just the games. One of the reasons that Pokemon itself is constantly in this struggle of we always feel like we're getting something new all the time is because we are. In a weird way, because of our own love for the franchise, Pokemon itself is almost a victim of its own success, which is so crazy. We're talking about the number one media property on the planet. It is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. I feel like I somehow say that in every episode of the ONETA Show and even ONETA Football Show and a bunch of other things. But what's crazy to me is that because of our own rabid love of the genre and specifically of the franchise, Pokemon itself feels like it never gets time to breathe between new generations. It used to be every 4 to maybe 5 years you'd get a new Pokemon generation where you'd get a whole new region of it. We are now on pace for every 3 years, and I would argue that's probably shown to be one of the biggest detractors to the quality of the games as a player. Although I love the new Pokemon games, I played a lot of Sword and Shield, I played a lot of Scarlet and Violet. Pokemon Legends was the game I liked the most because it was fresh, new, exciting, with different mechanics, but it held different things. Where Sword and Shield both very much became games that when I got done with the main quest lines, it was very hard to force myself to continue, to the point where I don't think I've even finished some of Sword and Shield's DLC, and I definitely have not done this DLC to Scarlet and Violet. And to me, that's a great thing of showing that quality that's missing, so you don't want to play it. You don't feel the urge to keep playing it over and over again out of love and excitement. Whereas to this day, I do not travel without a copy of Pokemon because it's still ingrained in my head all those times how often I just wanted to continue to play Red or Blue, or specifically Gen 2 with Crystal a lot, where I just felt the urge to play all the time. Anytime I had downtime, I didn't know what to do, I went, it's Pokemon time. So you got to remember those cycles. But the biggest thing is with the victim of his own success, as I was getting to a little bit, is this franchise is not just a game franchise. When you talk about Pokemon development, you have to talk about tying in the hugely popular anime. You have to talk about tying in the Pokemon trading card game, which is enormous to the popularity of the franchise. And you have to talk about the copious amounts of merchandise, let alone the other pieces of the franchise that are cornerstones of making Pokemon the company and the business money. All those things need to be tied in, which is why it feels very much like you constantly are getting a barrage of Pokemon, and you don't feel like the game itself gets to breathe much. I don't think that's inherently the problem. I think the problem is we're trying to align so many things all at once and not getting that extra year to allow the generation to breathe as much as it possibly could. So I'm going to announce in a few seconds the release calendar. But I want you to think on those merch a little bit more and think of how much Pokemon stuff you can find. Because I also want to say, go get some more for yourself over at ptcreative.etsy.com. I do have Pokemon merch available for you up on my Etsy shop. If you want to check through right now on the video format, you can go see. We've got new Pokemon merch, and we also got some new sayings, new Pokemon stuff. Some really cool legendary bird merchandise with the Bird Keeper line that I have with hoodies, sweatshirts, shirts, stickers. Gotta love those legendary birds, and I still have some great stuff besides that, all Pokemon related as well. But we also have football stuff, we have national park stuff, we have general travel stuff, other properties on there. We got more stuff coming all the time over at ptcreative.etsy.com. So if you want to get in on that action for the best that you possibly can, go to the shop, ptcreative.etsy.com. Use the promo code BLISS, BLISS, for 20% off any order of 2 items or more. So go check that out and help yourself out to some merch. Without further ado, though, without that shameless plug, we are going back now with the thoughts of Pokemon Legends ZA and extra development time. I'm going to go ruin that idea right now and talk about the release calendar. So as I was doing this, I was thinking about what do I believe is the best thing for the Pokemon franchise games. So although I actually do have release calendars going into the minutia of the Pokemon trading card game, we're going to save that for another day. I'm going to slightly mention anime in this, but I'm not going to go into full detail of what an anime schedule would look like because that is outside of my depth when it comes to talking about the games, because the anime is a completely different world. And although I will have more ideas on that moving forward, we're talking games today. So I want to focus that as much as possible. So here we go. Year 1 of a Pokemon game. So when I'm thinking of this release calendar, I'm thinking of a 5-year release cycle. So when I say that, you have, let's say, for instance, we're in the year 2024. Let's say year 1 was 2024. In 2024, you'd be getting one mainline Pokemon game, meaning your new Red, Blue, Gold, Silver, whatever the case may be now all the way up to Scarlet and Violet. So theoretically in timeline, this would be Gen 10. Year 1 is specific to only one mainline game because you want as much development time as possible to get onto your cornerstones. Your cornerstones are your mainline franchises in Pokemon. Although I am going to be talking about spin-off games, as you could probably tell in the thumbnail, those are never going to be as much of a priority as the mainline Pokemon games, because the mainline games are what defines the genre. Think of it very much like I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan. We've talked about that in the other episodes as well. The new Legend of Zelda games are important, but now we are starting to slowly get Zelda spin-offs such as Hyrule Warriors. Hyrule Warriors, very fun franchise. I enjoyed quite a bit. However, the true excitement is out of the mainline games, such as all the way from the original Legend of Zelda now to the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom era on the Switch. Those are the games that define genres, but also define the franchise as a whole. Those are the things that we're thinking about. So when you're taking it to a Pokemon context, although I am going to be talking about spin-offs, and they are important, they are fun and enjoyable, they don't define your franchise the way that a mainline game does. So year 1 of this theoretical release calendar is solely dedicated to the mainline Pokemon game. So for instance, we could even give it the code name Pokemon Bliss and Oblivion, which is currently being produced over, not the game itself, the region is being produced on the channel right now on YouTube, if you ever want to go check that out for yourself. I'd love for you to go check out the Pokemon Bliss and Oblivion project. Got new Fakemon all the time, every single week on Wednesdays. But for instance, if we were going to say this is Pokemon Bliss and Oblivion, the new mainline entry, our entire year is the company Pokemon, as the juggernaut of business Pokemon is we are all prepping, marketing, and getting ready for that new project, which is the mainline game. As we roll into year 2, you're going to see a little bit of pickup with games, but not a ton. I should also mention this. As I said, you have to tie in all merchandise. You have to tie in your anime. You have to tie in your Pokemon card sets. All of that has to be tied in to the release of a new mainline game. The reason you go November is you get the holiday season bump, which is what, honestly, Nintendo, for the most part, almost every year since Pokemon has become the juggernaut that it has relied on a Pokemon game to be its number one seller at the holiday season. So you're going to keep that trend alive with Pokemon in November, which is why I would launch anime, a new season of the anime, every December. So you get a month of gameplay to build anticipation and excitement for what's coming in the new anime. So if you find that Pokemon that you absolutely adore, you're saying, oh my god, I can't wait. For instance, if you're playing the new Scarlet and Violet games, and you love Lechonk, or you love Charcadet, or you love Ceruledge, or Palafin, or any of the other awesome new Pokemon, or specifically the internet's favorite menace, Tinkaton. Let's say you love Tinkaton. Guess what? That Pokemon's probably going to get you excited enough to at least see a clip of the new anime. So you're going to build a month of anticipation of playing that game, the mainline game, year 1, and then you're going to go into the anime year of December after you play Pokemon through November into December going into the holiday season. So that is what you want to do year 1 with a mainline game. Year 2, we start building a little bit more. So we go 3 major projects to discuss. If you have this on screen, you'll see we don't have another mainline game, but we have mainline DLC. So our year, really, when it comes to game development, in June, we're going to do Mystery Dungeon, the new Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Of the spin-offs, that's one of the few that has had the most legs continuously is Mystery Dungeon, and it is a popular franchise of its own. Although it would not be my biggest priority as a gamer, because Mystery Dungeon has never really spoken to me personally, without question, it's a fun franchise for a lot of people, and it helps keep the Pokemon game it gives a new experience to a Pokemon player because you're playing with Pokemon in a completely different way than your mainline games. Which is why we're going to do Mystery Dungeon set in a different region than where we just were in our mainline game. And then you can eventually journey back to your region with ties, so to speak. That's a great way to tie the new generation to your tie-in games such as the Mystery Dungeon. So, for instance, if we were using Scarlet and Violet, for example, we'd go to Paldea, and then we'd play through all of Scarlet and Violet's traditional mainline content. And now we feel like we've seen all of Paldea and we've played it. When we go into a new Mystery Dungeon game, we go through, we get put into a neighboring area that's tied to Paldea somehow, but it's not Paldea itself. And perhaps through the storyline of the game, you progress to the point where you get back to Paldea or other neighboring parts that are Paldea friendly. Maybe as a Kitakami, for instance. Because then you get the tie-in of the game that you played, so people are getting fresh new content all about the games that you just played, but it's not an overbearing sense of you're only stuck in that one place. For instance, in a Pokemon franchise that loves the original 151, there are many people that have Kanto fatigue. Such as, oh, we're sick of seeing Pokemon, we're sick of seeing Pikachu, Charizard, Mewtwo, Gyarados. Which, that's not really true. And admittedly, there is a part of me that think that's just entitled gamer wanting to do something different. And there's a merit to that argument. But a lot of time when people say, I'm sick of Gen 1, they're the first people to say they want more Gen 1 content, and they're excited when they see more Gen 1 content. So it is a bit of a balancing act. But Mystery Dungeon, you're getting a tie-in region, but not and a tie-in into the region you just played. We're going to get that in June. So that gives 7 full months of all the attention is solely on our new mainline game. That's what we want to achieve through this, is that we get, after we did so much development into a new mainline game, we gave it time to breathe. We gave it the time it needed to have it be the full center of attention of the Pokemon world at the time, and allow things to ramp up. And during that time, of course, you get cards and merchandise and all that thing, but we're not going into that. Then, in August, you'd get a new Pokemon Snap. One of the things I love about new Pokemon Snap and the original Pokemon Snap is it allows you to see a different side of Pokemon. Even as we've moved into a 3D era of gaming with more open world concepts being involved in Pokemon franchises, you rarely get to see, in a truly satisfying way, what it is like for a Pokemon in the wild. How they inhabit that space, how they act, how they move. You don't get to see that a ton, even in the newly updated 3D games. You start to get that in Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet. And yes, you technically did get a hair of that with the wild area in Sword and Shield. But for the most part, you're not seeing true engagement in the world of Pokemon. You're seeing Pokemon spawned into a place, and perhaps they have one action that allows them to kind of give the idea of what that is, but they're not truly inhabiting the world and being a part of the world, which takes away from the immersion factor and the enjoyment factor for a player. So one of the things we really want to do when we focus on a new Pokemon Snap game is the elements of there is no battle to Pokemon Snap. You are there to essentially be a wildlife photographer, but you're getting to see how Pokemon interact with the world, how Pokemon impact the world. For instance, there's in new Pokemon Snap, when you look at the beach and ocean levels, you're seeing a Alolan Raichu surf across the beaches near the water. So you're getting a vibe of where it is, what it does during its time. You'll see a Lapras cross part of the sea. You'll see a whirlpool that's clearly hinted at being created by a Gyarados with Magikarp coming out of it. You're seeing coral reefs with Corsola and Toxapex and other Pokemon of that nature really inhabiting the world. So you get a completely different view of what it is like for Pokemon to live and inhabit the world. It's a very necessary piece to the Pokemon franchise, where instead of saying, oh, this is on a desert route, you can actually cruise through a part of the desert and see how those Pokemon interact with each other and do those things. That's why I think Pokemon Snap should always be updated every generation. And many people think, oh, that's a little too gimmicky. I disagree because it gives so much more breadth and development to the world of Pokemon. It allows you to understand what those characters do in a quote real world setting, as opposed to kid runs around with Pokeballs, engages battle, catches them. Okay, great, you're now part of the box, and that's all there is to it. So Pokemon Snap would be very, very important to my strategic development because we'd get to go to various different regions as you're constantly a traveling photographer, and you could do that and see Pokemon in their natural habitat. How cool could it be in the same game? Let's say we're using Scarlet and Violet. You get to see Pokemon that are in the northern ocean coves near where it transitions away from the icy area and back towards it's the water's edge and beach and rock areas right before you get to the very classic Japanese bamboo style forest. When you're doing that section of the map, how cool can it be to see fish in the ocean really impacting the beach, Pokemon on the beach, and then within the same game, you could theoretically travel to dive spots in the Hoenn region and do deep diving into the sea to see Wailord, to see Wailmer, to see Relicanth, Clamperl, and see other Pokemon of the Hoenn region, but also just of the ocean lines in general. See how they interact on a deep dive of the Hoenn region. What does the surface of the ocean in a deep area controlled by a legendary Pokemon like Kyogre, what does that look like? And then, same game, you can go to Mount Coronet in the deep snow region of the Sinnoh. So that can give you a bit of the Wanderlust factor that all the players want to get with all the regions of Pokemon. You can achieve that in Pokemon Snap. And you can do that by also giving more context and breadth and environmental pieces to Pokemon through Pokemon Snap. So that's why August of year 2 would be Pokemon Snap, or a new Pokemon Snap. And finally, we'd be ending the year game-wise with DLC Pack 1 for your mainline games in November. So you're getting, again, the holiday boost going into a Pokemon game. Again, the reason you want to stick to November is to get those big holiday numbers up. You're going to make more money that way. So you're keeping Pokemon alive in that rotation of making more money, which is why it is done that way. However, the other thing that I think when DLC comes, I've had many discussions about this with our frequent partner on the ONETA show, my boy Angie. And he's very much says now, and it is true, that many development teams, when they develop a game, they know going in there's going to be DLC. So they plan the entire game, what the game's going to be like, and they know what DLC might look like, but they don't really flesh it out. We no longer, for the most part, live in the world of DLC being almost available at launch, or being so closely available at launch that it feels like you're ripping the player off by not including the DLC in the main game. But I always want to be cognizant of that. If I were the one on a development team, if I were the one on the business side, I would always want to be conscious of my consumer. We're asking a lot as the creators of Pokemon to constantly invest in everything that Pokemon does and is. So you never want to be looked at as greedy by having DLC too soon, which is why I give a full year's time for the mainline game to live on its own. And then when it's time and ready, you can get a DLC pack to continue your story in whatever region you may be in a year later. So you never lose the full excitement of a game. It's still fresh for the most part in players' minds, but it allows them to take a breath for a second and come back very happy into the game they just played with a new set of fresh eyes for the DLC. So that's why DLC Pack 1 would come out November, which is a full year post when we released Year 1's new mainline game. Now, Year 3, this is where it's going to start to look a little crazy. Year 3, you get 2 DLC packs in 2 new games, one of which is essentially a mainline game of itself. So you're going to get DLC Pack 2 in March. So again, your DLC, you don't want to burn it too quickly, but you want to give people new content in a relatively fast enough fashion that they want to keep the game alive and fresh. Pokemon will always be alive and fresh, mind you. But with a full year of development, the main game gets to breathe. You get a window for a mystery dungeon and Pokemon Snap to get some playability time in there. And then you go back with DLC 1. And 4 full months later, you can go into DLC 2 in March of Year 3. And you may start to get some fatigue of, oh, we're still playing this game. But you have more DLC lined up ahead of time, as some people can see on screen right now. But you want to give, again, that new element, that different element of what the games are. Which, like we did with Pokemon Snap, we added additional layers of context. We granted more scope to the world through Pokemon Snap. We're going to do the same thing in June of Year 3 with Pokemon Stadium. Now, a lot of people could say, and I could understand the justifiable argument, that, well, now the way animation's done in the 3D games and the way battling is taken care of, you don't need Pokemon Stadium as much anymore. And although I can understand that point, I highly disagree with that statement. Mostly because look at the difference between, and obviously you're going from a top-down 2D game that was very pixelated of the red and blue era and even the yellow era, to Pokemon Stadium with 3D models and unique motions and attacks. But the cool thing is when you don't have to render entire open worlds and you can do stadium visits, you have much more availability to make it Pokemon's own fighting game, but with the Pokemon battle mechanics still in place. That's the idea you want to go for in Pokemon Stadium, in my opinion. Is when you're creating it, yeah, sure, Surf gets one animation possibly, but how does Blastoise use Surf versus Lapras versus, say, an Alolan Raichu, who may be able to learn Surf in this game? How do all those Pokemon possibly use that move differently? Will there be slight variations? Of course they could. And that'd be the cool part. When you sacrifice the ideas of open world gaming to have a much more confined battle space like Pokemon Stadium could be, you allow a development team to get far crazier with the animations of a move. What is the difference of Flame Wheel versus Fire Blast? And not just, well, with the wheel there's the turning, spinning flames, and with Fire Blast you get the kanji. That's not what you're going for. You're going for, how does it really impact the stadium? How does it impact the Pokemon? What is the size of Flame Wheel versus the size of Fire Blast? What's the difference of Water Gun versus Hydro Pump? How do those two look? What does Razor Leaf look like compared to Leaf Storm? Those are all things that you need to consider when making those animations. So it gives the player an updated idea of what games could look like, but more importantly, what does the Pokemon world do? Part of the reason the anime has always been so popular is it gives more personality and more context to how Pokemon live and operate in their world. And what does that actually look like to someone living in the world? You get a glimpse of that. Where the games, when they couldn't be that back in the day, or they weren't designed to be that back in the day, you just had to imagine it to a degree. You didn't always get the benefit of great analysis of what Pokemon do and live like. So with Pokemon Stadium, you get, what does battling really entail? What does that truly look like, and how does it impact the Pokemon, but the people watching it? You as the trainer, what does it look like to be up close and personal with Fire Blast? And you can even put conditional stuff in, such as temperature gauges, such as uneasiness. So, like, what happens if a Pokemon's confused? What happens if a Pokemon is frozen or burnt or poisoned? How does that impact a player? Those are all things that you can put into Pokemon Stadium with greater animations to really showcase what the Pokemon look like. And if I were personally doing Pokemon Stadium, I would do a game that it's justifiable to not put all 1,000 plus Pokemon in a game. You don't have to do all 1,000 plus Pokemon, but you'd get a good chunk of the Pokemon. So I would really focus on the modern region that you just did in your new mainline game 2 years prior, and the classics that you want to see, and some other good Pokemon that you have great ideas for. That allows a battle circuit to pop up. That allows the idea of world tournaments with gym leaders, classic gym trainers. You can forward storylines that way. There's a lot of things you could do in a Pokemon Stadium game that would add so much more than just the mainline games can. So that's why Pokemon Stadium will be a focus project in these release calendars. That would happen June of year 3. August, we're getting our final DLC pack for our original mainline game. So almost 2 years after our mainline game is released, you're getting the final piece of content for it. That way we're never taking advantage of a player, but we're allowing the player to get the maximum experience and the maximum time with our game, still keeping it relevant in August, which is a super cool thing to be able to do. So you're getting a constant Pokemon exposure, but not overdoing the player with one particular game. So you're getting constant exposure, and you're adding different elements for players with Mystery Dungeon, with Snap, with Stadium along the way, so you're not getting fatigue of what does the mainline Pokemon game look like. And then finally, you're going to start your transition away from that mainline game in November of year 3 with a new Let's Go game. And I would continue the pattern that you've inadvertently started by starting with Kanto. I'd go straight to Johto if I were going to continue this franchise. The Let's Go games are a wonderful introductory game into the Pokemon franchise. Although it is very easy to enter Pokemon, in terms of franchise entries, Pokemon has a wildly successful model of how to enter the world of Pokemon with far less hassle than, let's say, even an Elder Scrolls game, or the ideas of Dark Souls, or FromSoft, the games of the Dark Souls ilk. There's a high learning curve to get into the game and really enjoy it. It's a high price entry point for a player's mentality of how they do things, where Pokemon is extremely easy to immediately get into the game and understand it and really go. And Let's Go was even better option because it allowed you to focus on the catching mechanics. Battling was second. The most important part was being a part of the world and showing off what the world can look like to new players, while also giving fun storylines, fun different things. So I would set a new game in Johto, personally, but then you can highlight 2 new Pokemon as starter Pokemon. You can further your storylines from the Heart Gold, Soul Silver era, while also revisiting old favorites. And you're revitalizing pieces of the Pokemon history and constantly feeding the animal that is Pokemon history within players. Pokemon, part of the things that's always made it grow, and which is why the National Dex is always a controversy when new games come out, is because people want to be able to play with their old Pokemon. Part of that is they want to play in those old regions with updated graphics, with updated animations, with higher end visibility towards their storylines that they fell in love with, the lore that they saw that could be cool, that couldn't really be encapsulated, and they've only thought about it. Now you can give it new detail. The Let's Go games allow you to do that in a very fun, safe entry point for players to get into, and it's very welcoming, which is why you want to go with a Pokemon Let's Go, which will be your next mainline entry, theoretically, in year 3. So your mainline game gets 2 full years by itself as the focus of the Pokemon world. The side games are all adding to the experience of that through different mechanics of how players view Pokemon in those worlds. And then 2 years later, you're finally going into your next big project, which is Pokemon Let's Go, which is November, getting that holiday bump once again in year. Now, year 4. Year 4 is where you got to speed it up a hair in a 5-year development cycle. So you're going to start with your DLC pack for Let's Go. The Let's Go games are only going to get one DLC pack, and that is to add to the scope of the game. The one big critique that I could say about a Let's Go game is for a returning player, they're fun and enjoyable to those regions, but it feels like you can very quickly lose interest after you've done a playthrough because you're revisiting something that you have done. That is the danger of a remake idea. So with the Let's Go game, we're going to give DLC. For instance, if we were going to go back to the original Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee games, which I think are phenomenal games and great tie-ins to your Pokemon Go, which is still wildly popular. If I were going to use a DLC, for example, why not go to the Sevi Islands? Or you could even encapsulate the anime and go to the Orange Islands. So you can give these new different ideas of what is possible in that region while not completely going, oh, we're going to have to tease a new game that's not going to come out for 5 years or 4 years at this point, and give a player a smaller version of what they want. You can go and add elements to the region and develop different things. For instance, the Let's Go games, what if they go through the idea of, let's say now let's forward it. Instead of Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee and the Sevi Islands, which I still think is a phenomenal idea. What happens if, let's say it's, Let's Go Hoot Hoot and Let's Go Wooper. I'm just picking 2 random Johto Pokemon I like. Or Let's Go Phanpy and Let's Go Wooper. They have starter energy to agree. Who cares? Remember in the Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and just Gold, Silver, Crystal lines, Cinnabar Island is taken out by the volcano that's on it. And all that's left is a Pokemon Center and a gym. That's it. What if, in a Let's Go game, you do your Let's Go playthrough of the traditional game, of the region, and then you forward the storyline a little bit of those pieces. So maybe we could go to the new development of Cinnabar Island. How do our catches matter? How do our catches in a Let's Go game matter to the development of a new Cinnabar Island? Maybe we're going out and trying to find rare Pokemon that can aid in the abilities of rebuilding Cinnabar Island. Or we've never really explored further west in Johto through the ocean. We've gone as far west as possible in Johto for the most part. But there's clearly more out there. What if there's a new chain of islands for us to go to? What if we explore further north than just the Lake of Rage in Johto? We explore more of those mountain regions. We explore more of those forest regions. There's a lot of things you can do well, not breaking it, but adding new breath and context to what you've already created, which is a wonderful world. That's part of the cool part of a Let's Go DLC. It's expansion of story and more playthrough, and very much what DLC is supposed to be. Fun additional content, but not necessarily super important to the actual experience of the game, so to speak. So that would be a little bit more of a fun idea for a DLC pack. So June of year 4, you'd get Let's Go DLC 1, and that'd be the only one you get. Then in November, you're getting the new Pokemon Legends game. Now, with the release of ZA and going to Lumio City, it's already breaking the trend of moving forward with what theoretically the remake schedule is. The big idea with Legends Arceus is it tied in so well with the releases of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and the focus on Gen 4 of that year and a half, 2 years time in the Pokemon world. Gen 4 got a ton of love in this past release cycle. But already when you're not going to Unova, and we don't have word on a new remake of a mainline game, you get the freedom in Pokemon Legends to tell the stories you want to tell, as is because you haven't started that pattern, which is a really nice breath of fresh air in a cycle of games. However, I would probably use it as a tie-in cycle. I just think it's wise to do that because people then you get the fun speculation periods in. But it does give you a lot of freedom. So in a new Legends game, you're constantly going to go. I personally don't understand the idea of possibly going to the future in Pokemon Legends. I'm still unclear. I can't tell from the trailer whether we're going forward in time to Lumio City or we're going backwards into the true development of what Lumio City is supposed to be. I hope it is backwards and we get more ancient Pokemon. That's kind of what Legends are in general. But a Pokemon Legends game, think of a Pokemon Legends even set in Scarlet and Violet, where you have Paradox Pokemon. Wouldn't it be cool to go back to the Paldea of Legend at the beginning of it and go into those desert regions and track down a Great Tusk? In my mind, that's pretty freaking cool. Wouldn't it be awesome if you're going through the forests and overhead in the darkness you see a Roaring Moon as a great challenging Pokemon? It's incredibly fun and enjoyable. Or what happens if you go back to Sword and Shield and you go back to the Darkest Day and you see the original battle between Zacian and Zamazenta versus Eternatus? That's what you're building to. You could even go back Legends Johto to the time of the burnt tower when it actually burnt down, and where the conflict became Lugia versus Ho-Oh to a degree. What happens when Johto is in harmony or right after the calamity of the burnt tower and the legendary Pokemon going away? How are you impacting that world? The reason I picked all these games in particular to focus on, because it's not as if you couldn't release other games in this release schedule, although I would highly kind of steer away from that to a degree because you still want the attention. As you can probably see, I'm focused on getting the attention on where it belongs, which is the main entries of the Pokemon franchise. With a new Legends game, you get the opportunity to roam, but you get the opportunity to put focus on things that you may have lost and bring them back into life and new enjoyment and excitement. So that's one of the beauties of a Pokemon Legends game. And again, you're giving a wildly different experience than what you've gotten. So, mainline game, you're getting traditional Pokemon. Then over the next 3 years, I'm seeing Pokemon environments in Pokemon Snap. I'm seeing true Pokemon Battle Against Best in Pokemon Stadium. I'm adventuring to just go capture a lot and play a completely different way of Pokemon in Pokemon Let's Go. And then in Pokemon Legends, I'm taking the catching mechanic to a different level, and I'm seeing the development of the Pokemon world prior to me existing in what is modern day Pokemon. And And I'm also getting mainline elements preparing me for the next mainline game. That's why I have the timeline set up as I do for a release schedule. I just think it's the best way that you can do things. So that's why November of year 4, you're getting Pokemon Legends. And finally, you have year 5, so to speak. Year 5 is in quotations for those watching on YouTube. Because year 5 is essentially the restart of the release calendar, so it almost becomes year 1 again. You're going to get in June, in quotations, new remakes. So theoretically, we're on point now that when the new remakes come out, we're going to get a new Black and White or Black and White 2. But when you do this, you get players invested back into the nostalgia, and it reignites everyone's brain into go, what's the next thing? Because you get back into the wonderful memories that you had with the original games that were just remade in June. So you're getting the wonderful nostalgia experience, filling people up with the positives of their past in June, and you're building anticipation for what's the new entry going to be. Which is why I held off remakes all the way until year 5 of our development cycle. And you don't need a huge time for them to live and breathe and be on their own because they've already done it. That's kind of the cool part, is with remakes, you get awesome remakes and you play them, but very few people, it becomes their life again like a mainline Pokemon game does as a Pokemon player. Because you've already played it. You've already done it. And now you're just getting updated graphics and other things, but you're not getting a lot of new content. Which is why I have a new, quote-unquote, new remake scheduled for June of year 5. And in year 5, quotation marks, also start of year 1, or year 1 of the new development cycle, you get your new mainline game in November for holiday season. So that is a 5-year development plan for what Pokemon games, in my opinion, should be. We have 4 full calendar years between a mainline Pokemon game and the next. So you never get that crazy, oh my god, Pokemon Sword and Shield, that's crazy. And within 2 years' time, you're already going, oh my god, there's a full other new Pokemon region? We haven't really fully digested the last one. And oh my god, there's Pokemon Legends now? What is this? This is amazing. I want to focus on this. I don't care so much about Scarlet and Violet. Oh my god, Scarlet and Violet. It became a very jumbled mess to a degree. When you had back to back Pokemon Let's Go, new generation games. Then you had Pokemon Legends, then you went straight into another new generation. It's a really quick development time, and in my opinion, I should say, it almost weakens the appeal of the new Pokemon because you don't get a time to really love and embrace the new Pokemon. You very much just go, whoa, this is new, I'm going to get through the game, cool. And you don't get to the exploration points of making new teams, building more relationships with other Pokemon than what you're used to. And that's a shame, because that defeats some of the purpose of the whole gotta catch 'em all mantra of Pokemon to allow you to see new things. So that is why we have year 1 in retrospect all the way to year 5. You have a 4-year gap in between mainline and Pokemon. So in review, quick, year 1, it is dedicated solely to the November release of a new mainline Pokemon game. Year 2, you get your first spin-off title of Mystery Dungeon in June. You get new Pokemon Snap in August. And you get your first DLC to your mainline game in November, giving it that full 1-year cycle to be on its own as the main focus of the Pokemon world. Year 3, you're getting 2 DLC packs, one in March, one in August. Sandwiched in between those DLC packs is the new Pokemon Stadium, which occurs in June. And finally, the end of year 3, you're getting a new Let's Go game, and you're starting your true big push into the next generation of Pokemon that is coming 2 years' time from now, into the Let's Go. You're continuing new franchises that have love and care for them. Year 4, you're getting DLC to the Let's Go games. And then you're going into your next big project, which is Pokemon Legends. That's going to happen as your November release. So it's your big Pokemon title going into the holiday season, giving those wonderful, wonderful Pokemon players another big thing to sink their teeth into before finally you get into, quote, year 5, where you get your Pokemon remakes in June of the next generation that needs to be remade. And then you go into the new mainline game that will restart the entire cycle again at the holiday seasons of November. After every major title release, so you can see November always gets a major title release or DLC included into its main title release. Every December, you're getting new anime launched. And then that also gives yearly cycles to all your merchandise, all your cards, all your movies possibly that are getting tied in, anything else that can possibly be tied into the world of Pokemon. You're on a yearly rotational basis of what you do. So the formula is there, but it allows people as creatives developing this game, as in the mainline game that defines the Pokemon genre, you are now getting those people an additional year every game. So when Pokemon Company works on a new generation, they have 4 years after the release of that game to start to really focus and hone on what they want the new generation to be, which to me increases the ability for better gameplay for everybody that gets to play a new Pokemon game. And that is the whole conceit behind this week's episode of the ONETA Show, which is the new Pokemon release calendar. I hope you guys enjoyed that release calendar. Now, before you go, I do have to ask you a couple things and double check something. If you liked what you saw, go check out the rest of PT Creative over on YouTube, or you can check out our podcast every Tuesday and Thursday over on Spotify. So Monday, you're still getting those awesome Pokemon card pack openings. Currently, I'm opening the new Temporal Forces sets, and these are very fun. Tuesday, it's always the ONETA Show. Podcast goes up of that as well up on Spotify. And it's just the rotating gambit of cool stuff. Next week, we're going to have some wrestling content for the first time ever on the channel as I prepare to go to WrestleMania. I'm going to WrestleMania 40. And I can't wait to talk about it, but also and experience it. But then I get to do a little bit of wrestling content here for the ONETA Show, and that's going to be real fun. Wednesday, again, you're going back into the Pokemon world, but you're getting new Pokemon designs with the Pokemon Bliss and Oblivion project, and that happens every Wednesday over on our YouTube channel. Thursday, you're getting the ONETA Football Show, and note on the ONETA Football Show, apologies to anybody on YouTube who did not get a new show last Thursday. It is available on Spotify. I'm going to give a quick version of it into what last week's episode was for YouTube on this upcoming Thursday's show. Fortunately, just the video file got corrupted, but I saved the audio file. So that got onto Spotify on time, but the ONETA Football Show video, unfortunately, was lost prior to being uploaded. So, and it's the first time I've really had an issue like that, but I'm glad we still had Spotify. As we build that audience, it's fun to have that. It's the ONETA Show on Thursdays. So you're going to be talking all football, and this week it is big board time. I'm unveiling my top players going into the 2024 NFL Draft as we prepare for mock draft 2 weeks from now on ONETA Football Show. Then Friday, you're getting the rotational gambit. You might get the Adventure Show, which a new episode is coming soon. Another ONETA Brick Builder Show, where we're focusing on the Legos, some other cool pieces of the Lego brick world, which is really fun to do, and you're actually seeing a Lego build happen. Or you might get some Pokemon packs, you might get a Yu-Gi-Oh pack opening, or just some other random fun stuff that we're doing on the channel. I wouldn't be shocked if next Friday you're going to get some real good ONETA continued content from wrestling standpoint for Friday's content. But we will have to see, and you'll have to keep checking us out on YouTube and all our socials and Spotify to see more. But once again, my friends, I must ask and must say, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, share this with as many people as you can. If you're on YouTube, hit that bell button so you get notifications every time a new video comes up from PT Creative. Go check out TikTok and Instagram. We're posting socials and doing things like that, showing cool products from the new Etsy store, files that are constantly getting put up. And again, go to Etsy, ptcreative.etsy.com, and use the promo code BLISS, 20% off any order of 2 items or more. But that is going to do it for today's episode. I have been your host, Evan Davies. And as always, it's been a joy recording for you all. Peace, love, and hugs. We out.